Washington just recently. During the course of it, you felt yourself, I think, excluded from some of the activities there. You got rather angry. There's a now fairly famous picture of you in a state of considerable agitation. Did you find that there was something political, or was this what Women's Lib likes to call male chauvinism?
It's a combination of both of these things. First of all, in terms of the women's liberation thing, I think people have to recognize that women in this country are also saying that they have a great deal to offer in terms of their own abilities, their own intellectual qualities and capacities, and that they have been constantly and persistently left out on the administrative and policy-making levels of this government. And just as the women's movement today are saying women want in on the top, blacks are also saying the same thing. It happens that I am simultaneously a woman and a black person, and this is causing a great deal of concern. Many persons have to recognize that even though in their own inherent basic attitudes towards women in this society that they do not feel their place is in the political arena, they have to recognize that I do exist. And what happened this past weekend in the Black Political Leaders Conference is the fact that although I'm the only black person currently who is saying that I am going to make a serious bid for the presidency, the attempt not to even permit me to speak on a broad level at one of the two panels that were going to be discussing strategies for 1972, when all of the delegates would have been assembled at these two panels, is a subtle and a covert indication of the feelings towards a woman's candidacy. Male chauvinism is a real problem in our society.
Well, this conference indicated that the blacks are pretty well divided. How can you be effective politically if you're divided?
I don't think that the blacks are any different from any other ethnic group in this society. There are always divisions within the groups. I think one of the purposes of this conference was to really see if we can bring in together from all over this country people who are holding important elective and appointed offices to map some kind of strategy for 1972. And of course you have differences of approaches and differences of opinions with respect to this strategy. Some feel favorite son candidacy, some feel lining up behind a single candidate, and some feel other things. And I think that we do have to recognize that there is no unanimity of approach as yet with respect to the strategy by black officials in this country for 72.
Mrs. Chisolm, isn't the disunity that you talk about that went on at that black elected officials conference doesn't it basically boil down to a struggle between you and the backers of the Stokes brothers, Carl and Congressman Lewis Stokes, to determine who is going to be the power broker in delivering the votes of black people in this country?
Since you mention it, let me just say this to you. I have said for quite some time now that if there's any black person that is going to emerge and wants to run for the presidency of the United States, that they should come out and say it forthrightly. That there's no necessity for reluctant dragons or persons rumbling about the fact that they'd like to make the race and not make the race, but rather than to revert their attention towards someone, and in this particular case myself, who has dared to say, now here I am going to make the race, I am traveling in the country now, collecting delegates, and making inroads into the different segments of the society, into black groups, women's groups, Spanish-speaking groups, and other groups. And I am saying that I am a serious candidate. I've never said or never felt at any particular point that no black man, for that matter, who wants to run should not run. But what they have been doing, they have been holding back, have been acting like reluctant dragons, and then proceed to try to bring me forth as a person who is interested in possibly using divisive tactics. Now that is very unfair and it's very unreal in pragmatic politics. If you want to run, come forth and say you're going to run. Have the courage, have the guts to say you're going to run. But do not begin to try to thwart the ambitions of someone who dares to get out and do the nitty-gritty work that is necessary to make the candidacy become a viable one.
A serious candidate could mean several things. Do you seriously believe that you can win?
I seriously believe I can win, given the nature of the forces in this country today, given the nature of what is happening. And permit me to say this, that you must remember that I did not project or initiate my own candidacy, that my candidacy was initiated by a cross-section of many groups of people in this country who are asking in. I have women backing me in this country. I have many blacks. I have many black males, those whose egos are intact, backing me. I have many young people in this country who are saying, Mrs. Chisolm, we didn't even want to bother to consider thinking about presidential politics because we can't think the system can work, but we're willing to give you a chance. I have many Spanish-speaking peoples backing me, and all of these people about 6 months ago began to ask me to make this serious bid, and so I proceeded to move on the basis of this call.
Is there a board or a committee? You referred in an article in the New Democrat to a coalition, and you said, I am the instrument of the coalition, and you indicated that you would do what they decided and what they wanted. Is there some group or committee whose advice and whose decisions you are following?
I am following the advice and decisions of several people from the different groups that I've just mentioned, but you must remember that I have not opened up my national headquarters as yet to bring together the coalition of the forces right here in Washington, D.C., the capital. I have groups in about 27 states, and hopefully on about December 3rd or 4th, we have just secured headquarters space here in Washington, D.C. We will be officially opening our headquarters and coordinating all of the efforts and all of the forces, and at that time, a press conference will be called to identify many of the persons who are associated with me in this movement.
Well, you've never said positively that you are a candidate. Are you saying now that you positively are a candidate?
No, I'm not saying positively I'm a candidate now. I don't know why I should be any different from some of the other aspirants. I'm still saying that as the momentum begins to swell and the fact that fundraising galas are being put together in this country and the forces are organizing more and more every day, that around January 3rd or 4th, if I am able to have at least $300,000, which is a minimal amount, because I'm not going to enter every primary, I will be a definite candidate around January 3rd or 4th. The chances are 99 to 100 that I will be running.
And does it make any difference what the other black leaders decide they want to do? You're going to be in it regardless?
Yes, I'm going to run regardless because, as I said, I was first projected by a number of forces 5 or 6 months ago. I also happen to be black. But persons have to really recognize that I am also a woman, and this is what is disturbing many of my black brothers, because in the Post this morning, one of them said, we do not want black politics mixed with women's liberation. Well, heavens, one of their outstanding black politicians in America today happens to be a woman, and I cannot get an operation to change to be a male at this particular point, and they have to recognize that women are human beings. And that is a part of the problem that many of them are having difficulties with. They don't want to say it openly. But we know in terms of what has been happening this past weekend and in terms of what many of the delegates were saying at the conference, that this is a real problem of an attitude towards women in politics. It's applicable to black males and it's applicable to white males. It's a real
Better
problem.
or worse?
Pardon?
Better or worse in one group than the other?
I don't know if you'll say it's better or worse, but let's put it this way. Because of the role that the black woman has played in this country for such a long time, and because of a society which had projected her into a very assertive, dominant role because the men had been emasculated for so long, she has a certain reservoir of talents and perseverance that she's been able to bring to many fields of endeavor. And of course, when you have a black woman like myself, who is a very assertive woman, who is a woman that has confidence in herself and her abilities, moving out here, it is a threat to some of my brothers whose egos are not particularly secure. And I recognize this. And I do want to say that we didn't have this convention this weekend to endorse any candidate. That was not the purpose of the convention because people have to do what they have to do. But all I'm saying is that there has to be a recognition that Shirley Chisolm does exist and that you must not try to use maneuvers to bypass her. That's all I'm saying.
Mrs. Chisolm, isn't the whole idea of women's liberation also, hasn't it been received with a certain amount of coolness by black women who are concerned about black male egos? And don't you run some danger of alienating both black women as well as black men?
No, I think that's a very erroneous thing, because when you have women like Fannie Lou Hamer and Myrlie Evers and Dorothy Height being a part of the Policy Council Committee of the National Women's Political Caucus, and these women do represent black women on different levels in the American society, one has to indicate that in the women's liberation movement, there are aspects of that movement that are very meaningful to the black woman because she is at the very bottom of the ladder. It doesn't mean that the black woman has to accept every platform and every plank. But when the women's liberation movement in this country has such a thing as national daycare centers as a part of their total platform, that plank is very meaningful to black women. And what black women have to learn to do is to accept those planks or those postures of different organizations that will be very meaningful for them in this society. But what is wrong, actually, the thing that is very, very wrong, is that when you use the word women's liberation, it evokes certain negative things in the minds of people, and that is very unfortunate.
One of the women you mentioned, I'm sorry, was Mrs. Medgar Evers. And Mrs. Evers, as you know, has endorsed Senator Muskie. Do you consider that, in a sense, a blow to your own candidacy?
No, I don't consider that a blow to my own candidacy, because whoever said that every black woman is going to support Shirley Chisolm? Whoever said that every black man, every white woman, every young person, every Spanish-speaking person, every one of the Democratic candidates are going to have people from these groups? That's not a blow to my own candidacy. I can't expect, merely because a person is black, he's going to follow me body and soul. That would be a very erroneous thing to expect.
How much clout do you expect the blacks to have at the convention, and what are you going to demand if you do have some clout?
First of all, the blacks have to come up with this strategy that they have been talking about, for the past 6 or 7 months. First of all, you can only talk about the blacks having clout at the convention if they do come up with a strategy that's going to be able to coalesce most of them into a force to be reckoned with. Secondly, in terms of my own candidacy, because I do have and do present a coalition candidacy, it will mean that I will be going to the convention with clout, irrespective of what other groups might do or might not do.
Well, what do you expect to demand at the convention?
I expect to have a very, very important role in saying what the total ticket is going to look like. I expect to have a say in terms of cabinet members. I expect to have a say in terms of some of the things that blacks and women and Indians and other groups who've never really had any input into a Democratic convention. I expect to have a great deal of say into saying what the next administration must look like or what must address itself to.
Should it have a black woman named Mrs. Shirley Chisolm in the cabinet?
That will be dependent on all of the people who are backing me at the convention as to whether or not they feel that this is a role that I should play. I'm constantly saying that because I want everyone to know that I am not running to become a vice president or to become a cabinet member. I am running very seriously to become the president of this country. And so therefore, I am not interested in discussing this from any other standpoint, but I also have to be a pragmatic political realist and realize that this might arise at the convention.
You've stated your opinion, not on this show, but in press and published in the past on many of the other candidates. But on Senator Muskie, you have a rather balanced, almost equivocal thing. You say you don't like what he said about the impracticality of running with a black vice president, and yet you believe that he can still retrieve his position if he were to meet with the black leaders. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I'll be very glad to expand on that. First of all, with respect to the statement that he made, perhaps Senator Muskie did in truth, and with utter candor, mention the fact that he didn't think that a black person on the ticket could be helpful. But it was not a question of utter candor or frankness. It was a question of beginning to prepare this country to engage in attitudes of the fact that a black person can be on the top level or in the administrative role in this country someday on the national scene. You have to make that comparison also to the Southerners who for many years felt that civil rights shouldn't go to black people. But yet, Southern leaders began to move in the direction of, by giving the leadership, it's a question of moral leadership. The reason I said that he might be possibly able to retrieve some of what he said is because his campaign staff and the forces around him are beginning to move in the direction, in terms of some of the most recent statements and some of the meetings he's been having, and of course and also on the employment of Mr. John Dean, who he's been moving around the country to see if it can be reconciled. And this is why I said that there's a possibility that he might be able to retrieve some of what he had said or felt.
Will you the point where he would possibly get your backing?
I am running for the presidency of the United States, so I don't know how he's going to get my backing.
Well, if you don't get the money that you say you must have in order to make this affirmative decision.
At the appropriate time, it will be clearly indicated whom I would back.
Will you support the nominee of the Democratic Party?
I do not know whether or not I would support the nominee of the Democratic Party, and this has been the position of several other persons who are also running and aspiring for the Democratic nominee, because we don't know who that person is going to be. George Wallace emerges, I certainly couldn't support him.
Well, you're a National Democratic Committee woman from New York. Don't you feel some obligation to support the party?
I'm a National Democratic Committee woman from New York. I supported Mayor Lindsay when he ran for the mayor of the city of New York. I supported other persons who were not the nominee for our party at certain conventions. That's not the issue, because ultimately my being the National Democratic Committee woman has to stem from the votes of the delegates at the convention. I became the National Committee woman because of the votes of the delegates, not because of the votes of political bosses who never wanted me in this position in the first place.
Mrs. Chisolm, some of the basic issues that you, I'm sure, will be talking about, aside from women's liberation, your support of minorities, how do you feel about what will be the effect of William Rehnquist's confirmation as a Supreme Court Justice?